Welcome. It's 1 o'clock somewhere. It's Monday, and welcome to the Deal Doctor Livestream. And welcome back. I hope you all had wonderful holidays and are geared up and ready to go to have a very productive and robust 2019. Before we get into today's topic, there's a couple of things I want to cover about our live stream itself. And as one would have it, our computer seems to be acting up a little bit here, so I'm going to have to wing this a little bit and improvise. But up until now, we've done a variety of topics. We've made it a half an hour availability and covered whatever topics happen to come up. We're going to change that up a little bit and focus on one topic for 15 minutes and then open it up to questions. And your questions can cover the topic that we talk about today, or the questions may cover any variety of issues that you might have going on. We'll allow a half an hour for the live stream, and then after that, if you want to continue to ask questions, please feel free to put them in the comments. We will do our best to get them answered for you, and within the comment section. So if you're watching, happen to tune in at 9 o'clock at night, that you will be able to find those questions and be able to ask about them. Now, if you just give me a second, I am going to attempt to make this readable. That works. And I want to make sure that I have the ability to get your questions here. So again, bear with me for just a second. And Dom is going to give me a little note here to just make sure that I can field your questions as soon as I can open up the actual document here that we use for doing that. And there he is. It says, "Can you see this, Don?" And the answer is yes, obviously. So let's get to today's question. Joe Hamilton brought up an interesting topic last week about ethics and the professional ethics going on occurring in our business today. I think it's a great topic. It's very timely. We're seeing a lot of things happening in our business today that may cause us to wonder whether or not another agent is behaving ethically or even legally. And so let's talk about some of those things. One of the things that I've found is Greg Carlson has a great saying, which is trust but verify. We can trust that agents will do the right thing. We can trust that they are going to collect an earnest deposit and put it in their trust account or an escrow account. We can trust that, but then we also have the responsibility Is an escalation clause valid? In other words, has the escalation clause, is there a real buyer on the other side that is triggering the escalation clause? How do we know that? Well, this came up very recently, where one of our agents used an escalation clause, and it triggered, and the escalation clause was triggered by another offer. However, the escalation clause that was used was not the escalation clause that we have for you in the 5-star list of clauses on dotloop. One of those phrases that is in there is the requirement for a pre-qualification letter to prove that the buyer has the ability to purchase the property at the price that they are making the offer. So in other words, if their offer is being escalated, if it's $150,000 escalated to $2,000 more than the next best offer, up to a maximum of $170,000, then they have to provide a pre-qualification letter which says they are qualified to purchase a $170,000 home. If they don't provide it, it's not a bona fide offer. The problem is that the escalation clause that the agent used didn't have that language in it. They got it from another agent in their office, or another agent that they knew, and that agent wasn't using the 5-star escalation clause. So what we were left with was an escalation clause which was triggered by another offer, but we could not demand that they provided a pre-qualification letter to ensure that that was a bona fide offer. That makes a really, really big difference. And ultimately, we have that right as we are working with buyers and sellers. We have that right to ensure that I don't know what Dom is doing here, but just keep going. He's saying we're just going to keep going. But we have the right, if we have a seller, if our seller is our client, we have the right to protect our seller. And it's very important that we do. And the way that we protect our seller when it comes to escalation clauses isn't with trust, and we can't rely on the ethics of another agent to protect our client. We have to rely on the contract. We have to rely on the language that is in the contract, and it's our responsibility to make sure that the language which protects our seller or our buyer is in the contracts that we write. So it goes back to trust but verify. In other words, in this case, if we had had the language in the contract which said this offer, the seller's offer, or the escalation clause is subject to verification by the seller that there is a bona fide offer which is triggering this escalation clause, and it's bona fide because here's a pre-qualification letter demonstrating that they have the ability to buy up to the amount they claim, well, then we would have exercised our due diligence. So my point is, when you're thinking about how you're going to structure an offer, you can't rely on what I'll call ethics, or I'll call or honesty with another agent. The contract is really the only thing that matters. Now, the professional or the code of ethics requires that we are honest with the public, that we don't intentionally go out to mislead the public. Well, how honest are we? How honest are we allowed to be if we are representing either side, whether it's a seller or a buyer. For example, if I have a listing and another agent asks me, well, do you have any other offers on that? Is it in my seller's best interest to tell them, no, we don't? Or is it in their interest to tell them, yes, we do? I don't know the answer to that. I guess it depends on what the marketability of the property is and whether or not we feel that telling them is going to help improve their offer if we do in fact tell them. Now, I would also caution that I wouldn't go down that road of giving an answer to that question without talking it over with my seller. In other words, I'd go back to the seller and say, hey, I've got an agent who wants to know whether or not we have any offers, and if so, how many? Is that information that you want me to share with them, or do you want me to go back to them and say, I understand your curiosity. I would probably ask myself, but that information is confidential to my seller. I don't see how that's going to help my seller to tell you how many offers there are or what those offers might be. So I would encourage you to write your best offer, which brings us to the question of the issue of highest and best offers. Highest and best. Would I ever recommend a highest and best offer as a listing agent? Do I, as a practice, go out and say, if I have 2 offers or more, do I go back to the buyer's agents and say, I want highest and best? I'm calling for highest and best. Well, the first reaction a lot of agents have is, well, they're just trying to run up the price. They don't really have another offer. They're just trying to run up the price. That the truth is, that's in my practice, in the deals that I've seen, that's not the case at all. The truth happens to be that there are other offers. Whether those offers are good or not is a whole different question. And whether or not we are counseling our clients properly is another question. For example, let's say that I get $150,000 listing. I get 5 offers on that property, and all of them are $150,000. Some are FHA, some are RD, some are 80% down. One of them is cash. That cash offer also has a clause, waives inspections. Okay, waives inspections, is cash, is going to close in 2 weeks, and the other offers all have to go through the mortgage process, the appraisal process, the inspection process. Is it in my seller's best interests to knee-jerk and call for highest and best? What if one of these other offers, the FHA, RD, and so on, what if one of those decides, well, I'm going to offer $20,000 more than the asking price so that my client wins the day? And guess what? They do. Your seller can't ignore the fact that somebody's offering them $20,000 more than the asking price. They get stars in their eyes, and sure enough, they accept the higher offer. And then, of course, it doesn't appraise. And then, of course, we have problems with the heater or something, or the roof, and the deal falls apart because of inspections. Let's go back to that number 1 offer that was cash, no inspections, close in 2 weeks. I think it's important that we as realtors are professional enough, knowledgeable enough to lay out the pros and cons and not simply have a practice that we sort of knee-jerk practice to call for highest and best. I think we have to look at each of the offers. That's part of our professional ethics, to look at all of the offers and say, you know what? I'm going to suggest to my client that they accept this cash offer or an 80% down offer or whatever it might be, instead of calling for highest and best, which is basically a Wild West shootout. So I think we have to assume when we start to talk about issues of highest and best in a highly competitive seller's market, that when a seller agent, a listing agent, is telling us that there are competitive offers, there probably are. I think it's a dangerous game for any listing agent to suggest that there are other offers when there aren't, because ultimately it will eventually come back to bite them. Got that one mixed up. So, to the best of our ability, to the best of our ability under agency, honesty is the best policy. There are certain things that you simply can't disclose under the confidence of your agency relationship with either of your clients, but you can tell the other agent, I hope you can appreciate that I'd love to tell you what the other offer is, but my client has specifically asked me not to. Conversely, if your seller has given you written permission to tell another agent what another offer is, you have every right to do that. So the question becomes, how do you operate ethically within this kind of seller's environment that we've experienced for the last several years? And the bottom line is, it's a case-by-case basis. You have to trust what they're telling you and always verify it with confirmation, like proof of EMD, pre-qualification letters, staying on top of them as far as inspection deadlines and so on and so forth. So I think I've taken up more than my 15 minutes that I promised you today, but it's an important topic, and I'm going to be here with you to answer your questions. And do we have any? No questions. Okay. So we're going to hang out here and stay online. I don't know if are we going to stay on camera? Is that the deal? Okay. In the meanwhile, you may see me doing some emails here and catching up on some work. But feel free to jump in, and Dom will let me know if you have a question. Okay?
Question.
We have a question?
This is from Kim Southwick.
Where are the clauses found? Kim Southwick asks, where are the clauses found? I know under clauses, but know where there's under clauses, but where specifically do you find the clauses? If you go on dotloop and you click on the what I call the stone tablets, the little overlaying papers. I think it's the second icon from the right up on the border. You'll see those. Click on those. It's the same one that you get your documents from. And then on the left side of the page, you'll see all of your documents for GCAR, for GRAR, and so on and so forth. Down at the very bottom, Wait. Keep scrolling down. You will see a section called clauses. It's in blue. So I hope that helps. Try it, and we'll stay right here. If it doesn't work for you, let me know. Okay?
question? Or a statement?
What's that? I'm trying to pull it up.
Oh, okay.
Come
You're trying.
on. My computer's 6.5 years old. We're going to be getting a new one soon. So bear with me here for a second. Joe Hamilton, you mentioned something about a walkthrough before close. I know that there was some discussion over the weekend about allowing buyers back into a house after the purchase agreement has been signed. I know there was a conversation, a thread on 5-Star Connect about that. I don't remember talking about doing a walkthrough, but we need to put them in the PA or write an addendum to go with the PA. What are your thoughts on this? It is becoming a big deal to the buyer, so we need to remind us to do so. Yes, Joe, you're absolutely right. There is nothing in the PA that automatically well, let me back up and say very carefully that, again, we're dealing with 10 different multiple listing systems, which many of them have their own forms. Some of those multiple listing systems do in fact include a mention of a walkthrough, or they allow a space in their contract which says there's going to be a walkthrough or there isn't going to be a walkthrough, which in and of itself is a bit of a reminder. So each of you in your own markets with your own contracts must be very careful to understand the contract itself and whether or not it allows a walkthrough or reminds you to allow a walkthrough. Now, the question is it important to your buyer? It might be. And if it is important to your buyer, then by all means you have to mention it in the PA. It has to be subject to the walkthrough. The closing of the contract must be subject to a final walkthrough. But what happens? How are you going to word that? There has to be consequences. It can't just say, well, this offer is subject to a final walkthrough within 24 hours of the closing. Because my first question to you is, so what? Does that mean you're not going to close? That's not what the contract says. Maybe what the contract implies, but that's not what the contract says. So if your buyer says, listen, I want to walk through 24 hours prior to closing, and if I don't like the condition of the property, I'm not going to close on it. Well, that I understand that, and that's certainly their right to want that. They may lose out in a competitive environment. They may lose to a buyer who's not asking for that. So it's a judgment call, and it's a conversation that you have to have with your buyer. This is what could happen. This is the upside. This is the downside. Now, what do you want me to write in the buy-sell agreement? Well, let's pretend that it has nothing to do with the day before closing where they're going to get possession at the closing. Let's say that they have 5 days or 10 days or a month possession after the closing. What do you do then? How do you structure a walkthrough to ensure that the property is going to be in the same condition as it is on the day of the closing or the day before the closing? Well, that's a lot tougher. And I have suggested to agents to have their offer subject to a short-term lease agreement and take a security deposit just as you would if you were renting a property, renting an apartment to a renter, that will allow you to have some protection held in escrow for 30 days if there's damage or property missing from the house when they move out, when the seller moves out. Again, it's a matter of negotiation, because what if there are 5 other offers and none of the other offers are asking for that kind of security deposit? Now you've essentially lost that house for that buyer by putting that language in there. Now, it may be worth it if it's that important to your buyer to have that kind of security. So, again, it's a matter of negotiation. If you are going to do it, make sure you have the consequences clearly spelled out if that walkthrough is not acceptable to the buyer from the very beginning. So I hope that answers your question, Joe.
We're at 32 minutes.
So that's our new format. I don't know. I hope you like it. I hope you found some interest in watching it. At least that way, with the last part, you can kind of speed through it if you don't want to watch it. So we'll see you here next week with another topic. We'll announce it in advance so you know what you plan on seeing, and we'll see you next week.